Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. I'm your host, Bill Potter, and as usual, it's Friday and time to talk with State Senator Mark Messmer, representing District 48. Senator, as always, welcome to the show.
Great to be here as always.
It's always good to catch up on what's happening with legislation, and we appreciate the time that you take. You have a new kind of a role this year, and an important role, because this is the year we have a longer session of legislation because it's a budget year.
Right.
You are on a negotiating team for the budget.
Yeah.
Talk about that a
Well,
little bit.
yeah, being a majority leader, that gets me, into the final meetings with House and Senate leadership, and then House, Senate leadership, and the governor. So that was a interesting process to be part of this year, rather than get the report from the leadership team of, okay, here's what we've decided on. You actually be able to be part of that dialogue and help set those priorities and do the negotiations with that, our fiscal team and the House's fiscal team and the governor's fiscal team. So that was pretty exciting to be part of that.
So you really had a busier than normal week because of that.
Absolutely.
Because I guess, was it Monday or Tuesday, the report came out about what the expected revenue will be for the state, and that kind of changes things a bit?
So Monday was our last day to do amending of the House budget, in the Senate. So Monday was, we had about 38 bills to finish doing amending on. One of them was the budget, and there was 49 amendments offered on the budget. So we had a 4-hour process of going through those amendments that were offered, and some were accepted, a few, most were not. But, there was a long, debate process, as it should be, on discussing the merits of including stuff or not, and then Tuesday we finished the final passage of all the House bills, and then we had to finish work on the budget Monday, and then the forecast came out on Wednesday.
Okay.
We anticipated the forecast to be lower than what we had been given back in December. We didn't know how much, and it was a combination of two things. The revenue forecast went down a little bit. I think the revenue forecast went down maybe 38 million. Over biennium is not a lot, but the anticipated additional expenses for Medicaid went up, and so total we were going to be, short about 100 million. We had buffered about 150 million, from what the House had decided to spend in the first half of the session. We allotted about 150 million less in our budget, just anticipating there would be less, and fortunately, we
good planning.
Good planning. You just have to plan for the worst. It's always easier to put stuff, back into the budget than to take this last week and then have to find out, figure out what else are you going to cut. So we had expected some changes, anticipated them correctly, and I'll say, most of the budget priorities, really from the governor to the House to the Senate, weren't substantially different. We wanted to focus a lot more time, a lot more of our resources on, on our side of the budget, dealing with K through 12 funding and teacher appreciation grants to get more money to teachers. We had an increase of $775 million in K through 12 education in the Senate budget, and it ended up being 50.3% of the total budget is K through 12 education. And feel really good about the way we reduced some of the other spending priorities that the governor and the House had put in, but primarily we wanted our focus to be trying to get as much as we could into K-12 education, and feel successful that we did. And one of the biggest changes we did in the school funding formula, the House had, from the budget 2 years ago, you have your base per student funding, and then you have what they call the complexity index, which is basically a multiplier that they come up with based on how many food stamp recipients that you have in your community. It's a statistical number we can go to the U.S. government and get basically the poverty index in each school district, and it's something that's we can get it. It's accurate. We don't have to try to guess what it is. It is what it is. Now, the good thing, for citizens across our state is in pretty much every school district across the state, the poverty index from 2 years ago went down. I think an average of about 14%, across the state, which is good. That means more people are working, less people on government assistance. But when that percentage of poverty went down, the House made no changes to how much money per student they were giving, based on the poverty index. They put all of their increase into the baseline number, which increased the dollars per student on the base, but they made no adjustments to the poverty index category. And so what we saw in most of my districts, most of my school corporations in my district, the House version of the budget, it had some pretty negative impacts, because if you have 14% less people, getting government assistance, but you don't make any changes in the ratios of base funding versus what was in that poverty index portion of it. A lot of my schools had dollars per kid either flatlining or by the time you factor it all in. So we said for every dollar we're going to put in the base, we're going to put 66 cents additional into that poverty index. We're going to make some adjustment to both categories, and then when we ran the numbers with that, and it takes a lot of we play with how much in the base, how much in the poverty index, and just kept playing with those two ratios till across the state there was very little negative impact, on most of the school's budget because of the reductions in their poverty index. So it's a very complicated process to go through, but we feel very solid about where we were. I mean, I don't anticipate the House changing that. I mean, they could, try to maneuver those numbers a little bit, but I mean, we felt pretty good about where we were, and I guess we just have the luxury of more time, to do that. From the House pretty well has to stop their efforts on that the first half of session. They realize we've got more time to continue to run different ratios and runs, and felt really good about that provision of it. And probably the most significant change in our two budgets was that. And then so we finished up amending on Monday, third reading on Tuesday of House bills, and then Wednesday began the period of what we call conference committee time. And that's where bills that were changed in the House or the Senate, you either have the option, and most of them I try to work with my House counterpart enough to where when my bill comes back, from the House, if it's been changed, we can just put it up for a concurrence, one final vote in the Senate, and we're done. And usually that's that. I mean, I think I've got actually one bill that I authored, that is in conference committee, because the House changed it so much. It was the bill dealing with the casino relocations and the sports betting, and they made such drastic changes to how it started that there was no way I could concur to that. So the interesting part of the session, we call it crazy time sometimes, is this conference committee time, and Wednesday was officially when that that process started. One of the bills that I had worked on, we actually had the conference committee hearing Monday morning, because we knew what we needed to change to the bill. It was the bill that I worked on in the Senate dealing with data centers and setting up parameters on large data centers, companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon. They put up, 100,000, 200,000 square foot, warehouses with, nothing but computer equipment in it. And, billion-dollar investments that they do, but our state has really had bad tax policy to ever get any of those companies to locate here. So when that bill came, when we worked on it in the Senate, we had a provision to even allow some of the construction material to be sales tax exempt if it was done by Indiana, contractors and suppliers. Department of Revenue says, well, that sounds like a very laudable goal, but it would be almost impossible for us to monitor that or make those evaluations. More work than the dollars would be worth that you're trying to save. So we pulled that back out of the bill, had our conference committee actually Monday on that, and then put that up for final passage this week in the House and Senate. So Wednesday, the interesting part for me being now on the leadership team, when we met with House and Senate leaders Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock to really start, sit down and start those in-depth negotiations with, with House and Senate leadership on budget priorities, and if they had something that was really important to them, something that was important to us, what can we give, what can we back off on to let them have what they want, and vice versa, to where both House and Senate teams feel like you've had your stamp of approval on the final budget. The two our appropriations chairman and the Ways and Means chairman continued then to work into the evening and the morning to do the final spreadsheets and all the things that we conceptually agreed to Wednesday. Thursday morning, that same leadership team went to meet with the governor and his fiscal team, to talk about things that he had started and changes we had made in the House and Senate. And here again, all of it really came down to the same target, what we wanted to get to on some of these budget priorities, but maybe a little bit different way that he wanted, he thought to do it versus how we did it. And those were all very productive. So we will have our, Monday morning, the plan is to have in our fiscal team worked, most of the day Thursday, with the House leadership, the House fiscal team. They stayed even on Friday to get everything hammered out. So Monday, we're ready to roll the final budget, out to both, House, Senate, Democrat, Republican caucuses, get it out to the public, and then we'll, there's still an opportunity for, for changing, but at that point, roll it out and have the, their conference committee, where they, get it out to the public, and then that really kind of starts setting the clock, to our final days, because there's, we like to have 2 days of that, out and final time for, for maybe last minute changes. But, so our goal is we have to be done Monday the 29th. We wanted to make sure we got done, the Friday before that. So if we had any hiccups, we could, bump into Monday if we had to. But it looks like things are moving quickly, enough that we should be able to get done, hopefully Wednesday. So.
And then will the session end?
Session will end, yeah.
Let's go back to that casino bill. Where does it stand now?
All right, so as it stands today, and one of our biggest, the first thing we started with Wednesday, which surprised me, it was the lead item with our leadership team, because when I started the bill, and as it went through the House, they took in the sports betting, they took the mobile app provisions out of it, and any state that's adopted sports betting, if you don't have the ability to use your phone to place the bets, you don't have a program. So, that was one of the provisions that said, yeah. They had one chairman in the Public Policy Committee that didn't like it. He wasn't at those final negotiations. The rest of them said, yeah, to make it a functional product, we need to put the mobile app provisions back in, and all the details and regulations that we had on the Senate side. So that was a quick agreement on that. And then when they had the moving of the boat from the water in Gary to in town in Gary, they were wanting to charge the casino operator $50 million to make that move. Well, I had the Gaming Commission look across the country of what the range of charges have been in other states to do similar, moving to a more strategic location. There's a benefit to the casino operator, and there should be some value to it. But I said, what's been the historical precedent across the country? And the cost ranges were anywhere from $5 million to $25 million was all anybody had charged, and some of those were for moving, into major metropolitan areas. I don't consider Gary to be quite that lucrative, but it'll be a nice addition for them, and we agreed to a $20 million charge for that move. As part of that process of moving the two boats off of the water, one would get moved into Gary, and we've agreed to give them time to pay that, so they don't have to, to be, financing that cost of that movement. And all that would end up doing would be, reducing how much they have to spend on the facility. Well, we want it to be a nice facility with, hotel and casino floor and restaurants and entertainment venues. And if you put too much pressure on the upfront costs, then it just reduces, what they've got left to spend on the facility. And then the license, I did not want to create a new license in Indiana, because if we do that, then really the other existing casinos could say, well, all bets are off of when you might create a new license anywhere you want, and that gave them a lot of heartburn. So we're gonna take one of the licenses from the Gary operator. Bought 2 licenses, and they do that. And the big advantage for them is being the same total revenue split among 2 licenses. It gives them a $10 million a year reduction in their gaming taxes that they pay. So when we take one away, we're not reducing their net capacity, but we're taking from them $10 million a year. And they said, that value needs to be, if we're going to just take it, the House just said we're going to just take it and be done with it. My provisions as I started the bill on the Senate side was we're going to come up with a valuation for that, and then have the license, the potential new license holder in Terre Haute pay them for that. Well, that didn't set well with the people who might have to, because then that would give the Terre Haute, or the Terre Haute bidder by the Gary operator, it'd give him that much of an advantage on his bid. So we decided in sacrificing that license, we're gonna give him that tax benefit that he's losing. And give him that continued for a 5-year period, but kind of phase it down a little bit to where he'll end up with a $40 million over 5-year period, tax break, to offset his loss of that license. And they felt like that was reasonable. They said they valued that license at $53 million based on the 2 licenses they paid, and that's probably realistic. The House started with offering $30 million. They wanted $50 million. We settled at $40 million. So,
right.
Kind of just the art of negotiations. Then the Terre Haute license. All we've ever charged any license transfer to anybody when there's been a transfer of ownership is $2 million. That's our historical precedent for that. So the new operator in Terre Haute will pay a $2 million license fee when their proposal is accepted, and then then it sets up the directions of how the Gaming Commission will evaluate the proposals and giving an opportunity for some local input into that. Then they have to have a referendum in Vigo County to approve it.
So and all of these things will be coming up next week.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing is the budget. Hopefully things go smoothly, and Wednesday you'll be
out.
done.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Senator, thank you for coming
You're
in
welcome.
once again.
My pleasure. Always enjoy it.
Our guest has been State Senator Mark Messmer, representing District 48, and we really appreciate you coming in on Fridays. We'll have you again next week and maybe do a little double show because it kind of wrap things up. Thanks for coming in. Thank you for watching WJTS. We're local people watching local people.